All right, everybody. Hope you're doing good this Tuesday morning. We are back for another video for our Sunday school lesson. Forgive me, I'm just pulling this up. One day I'll remember to pull up our curriculum before I start the video. It's not today. So, anyways, again, hope you're doing well. I hope you've enjoyed uh, this. This unit that we're in. I know it's been broken up a lot because we missed a lot of days with snow and everything, but we're about to finish Unit 5. Next week will be kind of more of a doctrinal lesson, which is really cool. Again, we end each unit with kind of covering some doctrine that really summarizes what's taking place in the entire unit, which I think is really beneficial because you're teaching the story, but you're also, excuse me, you're also teaching doctrine and theology, and which is very important, And so I think for us today, we're finishing up Exodus, and Exodus ends with a pretty important passage as we're talking about how the Israelites are to worship God. We think about worship, and today we take that for granted. We really do. We take that for granted because worship for us looks like, going to church and singing how great is our God, and lifting our hands, and yeah, that's great. And we worship God through that. But the Israelites, thousands of years ago, they didn't have a worship access like that and like we do today. We know that Jesus tore the veil, right? And when he tore the veil, he basically said, there's no longer this divide between God and man. If you have a relationship with me, you have complete access to the Father through the work of the Son. And so, but anyways, not to jump too far ahead of ourselves, I want to talk about what Old Testament worship looked like. And there's several, and all these principles are really things that we need to apply to our lives today. Because obviously, they do a lot of works that would promote holiness and whatnot. But the reality is sometimes we enter into the presence of God so irreverently, forgetting that we are worshiping the God of the universe. And I think it's important for us to remember not only who God is, but who we are, and what our place should be in worshiping Him. And so, just a few points. I did change them up just a little bit, the second and third point, because I thought that it kind of missed the heart of the passage. And so, but the first point we see is that worship centers on holiness. So worship centers on holiness. You see in verses 1 through 11 of chapter 40 that they go through, they make everything like perfect, and they were according to God's demands, and they did so because they were imperfect people. And remember, Christ has not died yet for their sins, and so there had to be a different process that went about. And so it's a lot different than maybe the way we prepare our worship spaces on Sunday mornings. This was very intricate details that they would do in order to make the place holy, because if they had not made the place holy, then when God came to dwell there, I mean, judgment could be sent upon them, all these different things. And so, but today I think we have to remember that when we worship God, it's like He is a holy God, and we need to enter into that space appropriately. And that leads us to our second point, is that worship demands consecration. So worship demands consecration. It's not a word that we hear a lot in the New Testament. In fact, I'm not sure if it mentions it at all, but it certainly does in the Old Testament. And this is something that we certainly don't use in our everyday language today. But consecration was basically just like making oneself holy, um, setting oneself apart, so that, as they were experiencing the presence of God, that they would be clean. Remember, we're not clean people. And so going before the presence of a holy God, where He can't be in the presence of our sin, the only reason we can go before Him now is that Christ is our mediator, right? Is the blood that was shed for us, coats us and overshadows our sin, washes away our sin, to where when Jesus sees us, He doesn't see us in our sin, but He sees the blood of Christ, that was the redeeming blood of Christ laid upon us, so that we could be made right with God. But in the Old Testament here, they had to consecrate themselves. They had to. There was these things they would wear. There was this confession of sin they would make. And again, guys, we don't have to do that today. But what we do need to be very aware of is the fact that there is something to be said about making oneself holy before we worship God, confessing our sins, right? Making sure we're not entering the presence of God lightly, realizing who it is we're worshiping, right? I mean, we have great access, and yes, we get to come before Jesus, and he loves us. But man, when I read more about who God is, I realize how unworthy I am, and how when I worship Him, I want to be clean before Him. You know, and it leads us to the last point: is that worship is experiencing the presence of God. Worship is experiencing the presence of God. Excuse me. You see at the end of the chapter that literally Moses um, could not approach the tabernacle because the Spirit of God was dwelling there. And that means like we can't handle the full um, glory of God, right? Like if God in all His glory stood before us right now, I feel like I have no doubt we would just drop dead, right? Because we just can't. I don't think we can experience that, right? But in heaven one day we will. And the passage ends, and it's a common theme through Exodus, but the same Spirit of God that overwhelmed the people, right? This pillar of cloud by day and this pillar of fire by night would lead them through the wilderness until they reached the promised land. Um, and so I hope all that. I know that was a little long-winded, but I hope that helps you think about worship, especially in the Old Testament. I hope it makes you grateful for the sacrifice that Jesus made for us on the cross, so that we don't have to do all those Old Testament rites, and um, we can we can worship God in a much more accessible way today. But remember, let's make ourselves holy. Let's let's consecrate ourselves before God before we do that, right? Because He's worthy, and He is a holy and just God. And so, anyways, I'm praying for you guys this week as you teach, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.